Today's podcast can be a little bit difficult to listen to or watch. We recommend that you take care if you're listening or watching this video. If you need any additional support, we have included some links to help in the show notes. Today, actually, we're doing a slightly different episode format, and I am going to be interviewed instead of being the interviewer. This is so scary for me.
I've never actually taken this role before,
Oh,
so
really?
I actually feel a bit nervous. I feel you are quite a magical person.
It's almost like a reclamation of myself and my voice to be able to lift up other voices.
The way grief just suddenly reappears and takes you by surprise.
Yeah. When I watched the episode back, I was talking about these horrendous things that had happened, but I was smiling. And actually, it's a trauma response. Financially, I'm probably in the worst place I've ever been. Running a business is tough. My self-worth has really taken a nosedive since I became self-employed. By being vulnerable and courageous and putting myself out there, it helps to unlock the magic in others. Hey, I'm on the Nurture Your Zest show today. I'm Ashleigh King. Hi, and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will bring you a wealth of interesting people with fascinating ideas across the tech industries, the creative industries, and also uplifting stories of courage and hope. We all go through prickly situations in life. I believe that through courage, creativity, and curiosity, you can find inspiration to nurture your zest. That thing that gets you up and out of bed every morning, the thing that lifts you up and lights up your day. So join me in the studio and let's see who we have in the hot seat today. Hi, I'm Ashleigh King, as you know, and this is Nurture Your Zest, so welcome back. Today, actually, we're doing a slightly different episode format, and I am going to be interviewed instead of being the interviewer. This is so scary for me, but so much fun. So I'm joined by the wonderful Charlotte Nichols from Harvey and Hugo and two fantastic podcasts. And so I really can't wait to see where she goes with this.
And thank you for the honour of allowing me to be a guest interviewer. I've never actually taken this role before, so
really?
I actually feel a bit nervous.
Okay.
I feel responsibility in living up to your high standards.
Oh, don't be silly. Yeah.
But let's go for it.
Yeah, this is fun. Well, it's funny because you interview people all the time, but you've never done it on someone's show as a guest.
No,
Wow.
and you do feel different because you kind of own your own brand and your own podcast, don't you? And then someone else is, will I do it a good service? So I'll try my best.
Oh, well, we're very happy to have you here, and however you do it's going to be great. But it's also nice, I think, to inject some of your show and your personality.
Yes, it might just be a little bit more personal than normal.
Of course,
But here goes. But it's amazing to be in your studio. I love it. I love the attention to detail in your set and everything like that. I just kind of wondered if you could tell me a little bit about the studio and also where the name Flamingo Heights comes from.
Yeah, of course. So Nurture Your Zest is my podcast, but Flamingo Heights is where we record. And so we do, a lot of people think that I just have the studio to record the show. And I'm like, no, we produce shows for people. You know, often I don't even release my own episodes because I'm doing it for other people. Flamingo Heights really came about as a result of me. I was made redundant in 2019, so I moved very quickly up the ranks in higher education. And what I found was that I couldn't really get much further without a degree, a master's. So I went to study a master's in business administration, an MBA. And at the time, I thought I wanted to go and do something very businessy or go back to higher education and work in that environment in the professional sort of PR press teams. However, I started my own business to try and kind of cover my time and have something to do. And then it was all events. So it's all these things like making spaces beautiful. So I'd go to festivals or I'd go to like do hen do's or baby showers or things like that. And I'd just bring together lights and curtains and flowers and decor. And I'd create the space that was just visually quite striking. And I had so much fun doing it. But the thing is, no one wanted to pay for that because it was like, if it was a hen do or a baby shower or something like that, people wanted to do it for their family or friend. They didn't want to necessarily pay someone for that service. And so I found that I was doing a lot of stuff for exposure and taking beautiful photos, but then I could never monetize that. And when COVID happened in 2020, I was actually already a podcaster. So what happened was people started to say, hey, how do you podcast? And so all of a sudden I was getting all these questions, and I had in my mind, maybe one day in a studio, in an ideal world, I'll start a studio in like 5 years' time. But actually what happened was I started a studio, and I started to make money out of chatting, which still to me is like, what on earth? Like, and what's really funny is if you zoom out, things like the attention to detail and the decor and stuff, those are my gifts. So I didn't think they were gifts. Absolutely. I didn't know they could be gifts. Like, why would just putting different things together be something that you could use? But when I look around the studio and the space we've created and curated, it is like a splash of color and personality and fun. So the Flamingos, I bought the domain because I wanted to do Airbnb, and we had an upstairs flat, and I thought, well, people can be in the Heights and it'll be Flamingo Heights. But actually what happened was I had a great producer, and I could have worked for them or others. And a lot of studios are down in the basement. And a lot of studios you go in and you can't do your makeup. There's nowhere to kind of like get ready. And in my experience, I've been trying to put on false eyelashes and like mirrors that are like this skinny. Okay. And so for me, I wanted a place that was up in the Heights rather than the basement. I wanted it to be bright and light, and I wanted it to feel like you were putting cozy slippers on when you walked in. Yeah. But I also wanted a place where it was fun and funky and just wild. And to me, flamingos are majestic creatures. You know, if you look back to Egyptian times, they were revered. They were a very spiritual creature. And I also feel that they never try to be anything but what they are. So you don't get a flamingo trying to be any other kind of bird, because they can't. They just are not, you know. And I mean, I just find them so unique. So I've always felt like I've never fit in. And I'm sad about that, you know, and I think that's why I always want to make spaces for other people who don't fit in. But to me, with flamingos, it's like, who cares? Let's just build our own tribe. Let's build our own flock, our own flamboyance, which is a group of flamingos. I
learned that last night. Yeah? I read in my eldest daughter's book.
Oh, did you?
It said a flamboyance of flamingos. I thought, that's wonderful.
Isn't it? Yeah, so the room we're recording in is called the Flamboyance, but it's where we make the magic happen. And I just really felt connected to this idea of like, just be who you are, or just step into those gifts. I think gifts is a really interesting word. I had a podcast guest last year who was quite offended by the word gift. Oh. And it really took me by surprise, because they had said, well, I've spent so much time and energy working on my talents or working on my craft. So to call it a gift undermines it, because it feels like it's an innate thing. Whereas it left me thinking for a long time. I think we all, as humans, have unique values or gifts or things that we take for granted. And actually, when you zoom out, there's probably reasons why someone would only work with you, or would prefer to work with you or someone else, based on what all these unique attributes that seem like they don't matter at the time, but then they all add up when you zoom out.
Yeah. I believe in gifts, and people have certain gifts and talents, but equally I do believe that certain people work very hard to either hone that, or perhaps it wasn't a talent and they've made it become so. But it's interesting, isn't it? Perspective. And I really think you have created magic here. It just has a special feeling. And I've mentioned this to you before. I feel you are quite a magical person, and maybe that's your gift. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
I love the word of being magical. So I'm a very spiritual person, and my background's Christianity, and I would still identify as a Christian, but maybe a spiritual one. Yeah. Funny enough, I have had strange times with my faith, but it's actually spiritual things that have brought me back to God. Right. And exploring crystals, of all things, and other kind of elements of Christianity. I would say magic is really important, and I think there's something about transmuting challenges. And so for me, I always, as a child, wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had like my first newspaper at age 10. Wow. And I would like recruit people at school to be part of the newspaper club, and my dad would teach me because he was a journalist. And so I was always learning about these things really young, and then had some adverse experiences where while studying journalism, my best friend was murdered. And that was just such a huge thing that happened to me that made me kind of hate journalism and hate writing and hate using my voice. And then, like lots of people, I just found myself lost and stuck. And then I was like, well, what am I doing with my life? And what am I meant to be doing? And just all these searching questions around 25, looking around the offices thinking, why has everyone else got it together? Looking at Instagram, scrolling through and thinking, why is everyone's life so perfect? How did they get the memo on how to do life? And just this comparison thing. And so, yeah, I feel like magic is really important. I love to be identified as that, because I just think when you step into the person you're meant to be, or when you sort of take courage to try things differently, you can actually hold a mirror or open up opportunities for other people because you give them courage through your own vulnerability. So that's a real compliment. Thank you.
Oh, well, I wouldn't just say I truly feel it.
Yeah, thank
and
you.
I think you can sense that you're quite a spiritual person who has experienced challenges and, as you say, transmuted them, which I think is really important to do. You spoke on my podcast, where we talk about personal issues you faced, and you just alluded to losing Joe. Do you want to talk a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can say, gosh, I have to be honest, Charlotte, and this is like so blunt, but like your podcast is probably the scariest podcast I've ever done. Even though I had the questions ahead of time, there's something about being in the seat and getting that hard question in the moment that floored me. And I came back in my team, I was like, oh my gosh, that was so hard. And I remember I was speaking at an event later that day and I was just like, what on earth? This was crazy, this episode. So for anyone who's listening and wants to go check that out, we'll put that in the show notes. But I mean, it's quite a vulnerable episode. And yeah, so Joe was nearly 21. He was just the most incredible soul, and unfortunately he was murdered by somebody who wasn't known to him. For me, it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to have this beautiful, kind soul who was just so incredible taken, so young, with so much life. And I just didn't understand. Part of my faith as well is, how could there be a God when this kind of thing is happening? With Joe, I don't think, I think I'd healed a lot, but going on that episode really shook a lot of stuff up for me. One of the things I wanted to, I guess, think about was just how friendships change. So when you lose someone like that, I don't have friendships in the way I used to. And I know that. Like, my friends regularly tell me that I'm not present, or I'm not there, or I'm not there enough, or I don't reply enough. And I want to be there for my friends. I want to be interacting with my friends. But there's this fear of like, but what if they go away? You know, and again, I didn't know that consciously till I went on your episode and thought about it. So I think, there's this sense of like pulling all this stuff up can be powerful, and it can really help other people going through tricky stuff too. But it's also like you kind of re-experience stuff too. So I think with the Joe thing, I want to direct people to that episode because that's worth watching on its own. But it's just so interesting how we carry these stories in ourselves, and some of them are fit for consumption and some we're still working through.
I know. And then when you hear them out loud, you sometimes process them in different ways, because that'll be part of your internal story that you probably hear again and again internally, but hearing it out loud, it's sometimes a whole different ball game. And I'm so grateful that you did share that story, because it will have helped other people. And I'm grateful for your vulnerability. And I'm always so grateful for the guests, because it's such a difficult thing to do. And sometimes it can be a release. And I get that a lot from guests saying thank you, but equally it can stir up difficult things to deal with as well. I found it traumatic hearing your story, and I still think about it. You were so articulate in the way you told it, that you built up for me an image in my mind, and a fear as well, and also gratitude that my friends are okay, that I haven't experienced that. But I get what you're saying about the friendship thing. For me, I think I'd have that fear in learning to love a romantic partner again. So it makes sense about the friendships once you've lost someone so dear. How are you feeling at the moment moving through it? I hope it's not bringing it all up again.
I think it is, but it's a natural thing.
Okay.
And I think it's worth us talking about that, because a lot of people, because we are competitors, collaborators, colleagues, I think a lot of what we do in our jobs is talking about stories and talking about journeys people have been on, whether that's professionally or in their personal life. You know, we help people to talk about them, especially in podcasting, because we both do that. And I think when you put your story out there, you've got to be prepared that people are going to interact with it in ways you don't even understand. So one of the things that I've mused on since your episode is this concept of how we tell stories, but as guests and hosts, how we interact. So as hosts, how we take that content and we ask the questions to pull the information out. But even things like how we interact with how we respond and how we, you know, so like I might say something and your face might be stoic or it might be smiling. So when I watched the episode back, that was hard, because when I watched the episode back and I saw that I was talking about these horrendous things that had happened, but I was smiling, I was like, what is going on with me? And I did some research, and actually it's a trauma response. Okay. So for people who've been through a traumatic experience or who have complex PTSD, which I have been diagnosed with in the past, they can just be all smiles, but they're talking about this really hard stuff, but it's like a separation. Like they're not able to connect with it because it's too painful. So they've split themselves off in a way. And that's something that I've noticed and been musing on a lot since our conversation. So yeah, it's a really interesting thing about like how do we help people share their stories, but also look after them in that moment and afterwards, because they can then go on and be okay. But sometimes they're not. And this is what really worries me. And I know we've talked about this before, is there's an instance where someone I know had run an event and they had someone sharing their story on stage, and then a few weeks later they took their life because it was so triggering for them to reshare that. And this is where I'm like, as event organizers, as hosts, where is our duty of care? Do we have, you know, like with this episode, we'll put a trigger warning on, we'll have numbers for people to call if they need to. But that's not something we always did. That's something we learned with time. It is important. And I guess having the space and the courage to have conversations openly and deeply is important too. So it's just such a hard one. When you become a podcast host, you think, yay, I'm going to talk to people. Yeah. You never know what's going to come out in a conversation, which is why it's important as well to have those briefing notes to chat through what people want to talk through as well. And it's really tricky. I think as part of myself as a podcaster and my values of my show, I find it quite a hard one. It's like, what stories do we tell? But then you don't want to gatekeep people's stories. But at the same time, you'll have this yourself where if you're funding the production, you can't have everyone on the show. You have to think about the ones that will be most impactful.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember you mentioning that about, you know, trigger warnings and being responsible for people's actions after hearing your content or actually speaking their content. And it gave me a sleepless night, in all honesty. And I spoke to my team about it, and it's just like, but again, it goes back to kind of something I talked about on your podcast about, you know, you can't take responsibility for everything. You can speak your truth in that moment. People can misconceive things, misinterpret them, and you can't be responsible for their actions after hearing the content or after speaking on the content. But equally, do you ever feel guilty that perhaps you're using someone's story that can be quite emotional as content?
Absolutely. So that's something that I feel really strongly about. So part of why I've never really talked about what happened with Joe being murdered was that I didn't want it to ever be like I was selling from the stage, you know. And so I've thought about sharing it and elements of it, you know, as part of my journey and various different talks and things, but I just don't, because to me, I would never want to sell my friend's story or from the stage. It's not really about what happened to them, although that is horrendous. It's more, for me, it's the fact that as a 21-year-old, I didn't know how to deal with the police. I didn't know how to behave in a criminal investigation where you're being questioned, because of course, if someone's so young, they want to know everything about that person's life and about their journey and what they've been up to, and you're their friend and you've got all this information, but you don't know how to interact with the police at 21. So part of that as well is, the way the media sometimes contact friends and family and how they get little excerpts. So they take stuff from your social media, or they take pictures from your social media, and you might put something on their profile, but they're dead now, so now the profile's public, and so they can take what you've put and put it online, and there's just so much there that I didn't know how to cope with, and I think even things like having a funeral for your friend at that age, like having horrendous. A farewell party. We had a rave. We had this memory book, which I still have actually. It's funny, like you can think you're over it. And I went to his grave recently. I tend to go on his birthday or on the anniversary weekend of when it happened. And I still sob my heart out. But it takes me by surprise every time, because I think, I'm fine, I'm healing, I'm over it. And it's like so many things can go on. And then you're just like, oh my gosh. So it's funny how things hit you.
Totally. The way grief just suddenly reappears. Takes you by surprise.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And so there is something, it's about our brain. Its primary function is to protect us.
Yes.
So what it does is it holds onto our memories and our storage. So sometimes we think we're absolutely fine, and that tends to be when our brain goes, you're safe now. I'm going to now give you this bunch of stuff you haven't processed, which is why for anyone listening or watching, you think you're flying in life, but all of a sudden something comes up and you're like, why have I sabotaged myself? That's exactly what happens. And sometimes as well, people choose to keep it in Pandora's box.
Yes.
And that has a value too. So yeah, for me, I don't feel that I'm using it as a story to commercially benefit in any way. I'm very sensitive to how I tell that. But the main thing is that at that time, because I was studying journalism, I did quit my degree. I did step away from that. I did decide that, I'd wanted to be a journalist for the BBC, the next Fern Cotton or Alexa Chung, going around like all these amazing festivals, doing vox pops, chatting to people about the favorite bands and music. And the idea at that time of doing anything to do with storytelling, to do with media, I just couldn't engage with it. And so to me, I always wanted to be a journalist from so young. It's almost like a reclamation of myself and my voice to be able to lift up other voices.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily about like a trauma thing of like, I'm going to mine the story of what happened and use it to my advantage. It's more, how can I uplift other voices and how can I overcome? And I think that's important, and that's something that I'm still working through, to be honest. And it's tricky, and it's like knowing the line. And I probably don't talk about it much publicly at all, out of sensitivity to friends and family involved.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously, you've created this amazing podcast which tells other people's stories. And it's called Nurture Your Zest. So Ashleigh, how do you nurture your zest?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. It's something I really need to do at the moment. I am not in my favorite version of myself. I would say that I'm feeling really sad and down, and I think it's okay to share that stuff publicly. Yes. I think there's power in saying things aren't perfect. So I have a wonderful husband. I have a wonderful, beautiful daughter who's a miracle. I love my house. So we've recently moved house, but financially, I'm probably in the worst place I've ever been. Running a business is tough. We had unexpected roadworks outside our studio for 4 months. And that sounds like not a big deal, but when you are recording audio and video all day, every day, and you have clients and that's what you do, you need really good sound. And so what happened was, at the same time as a bunch of contracts ending naturally, we just had this thing pop up where we couldn't record. So my brain sort of had this panic of, well, how can we service these people? So then I just knew we couldn't service them for 4 months. So I was a bit like, where do I go from here? And I think that's had a big impact on me and my mental health, because I was still quite early postpartum. So I had my daughter September 2023, and this happened February 2025. So, still new into my motherhood journey and new into my return to work. Didn't really have a clear strategy because I was a bit like, what on earth is my business? Who am I? And so I didn't adapt to that as fast as I should have. And I also really tried to keep people's jobs, and that was hard. And I feel like I'm still grieving that because I have incredible people that I've worked with over the years and that I would love to support more. And I think what I'm still working through right now is, how do I give, but give from a place of abundance? How do I uplift stories, but do it where we get paid and it's a commercially viable option and it's not constantly giving away? And then that leaks into other things like money stories, right? So like we all have money journeys and stories, and I've realized that I always just give it away. It's just, to me, that's just who I am and what I do. So how can I do that where I give it, but I also give to my own family, and contribute in that way?
Yes.
And it's such a weird thing. I think my self-worth has really taken a nosedive since I became self-employed, because before I had a steady income, and maybe I frittered away money on things that didn't matter if I look back, because I had an income that was, I could buy the best brands, I could buy the best crisps without thinking about, whatever, you just do it. And now I'm like, everything is a question. I've learned so many things. So for me, nurturing my zest right now, I would probably say, it's funny for both of us because we're in the media space and we need to post online. We need to be online a lot. But I would say actually quitting social media for a bit, not scrolling, not comparing with everyone else, taking a moment to spend time in nature, to journal and not numb yourself, because we all have ways that we numb our pain. And I mean, that was part of Nurture Your Zest for me, is actually it's about overcoming adversity, and through courage, creativity, curiosity, you can find inspiration to nurture your zest. That was the kind of mantra of the show. And it still is that for me. So over Christmas, one of the ways I nurtured my zest was puzzles, jigsaws. Lovely. It's a very wholesome activity, but I love doing it, and I love doing it without the picture. It sounds weird. I just love to like problem solve. I found jigsaws, especially if I've got no music or TV, whatever business problem or personal problem I might be working through, I can fix it when I'm doing my jigsaw. So it's a very mindful activity. But yeah, walks in nature. And those are probably the two main ones at the moment, but I'm definitely someone at the moment right now in need of following my own advice. So I would say I'm working through that right now.
It's hard, isn't it, when people say that money's not important in life and it's all about love. And absolutely, love for me is the most important thing. But when you're struggling financially, and I can relate to that as a business owner, as many business or self-employed or many people in general can, it is such a stressor and it affects everything. But it will turn around. I believe that in everything, whether it's, however that looks. But can you explain to people how hard it is? You talked about having that regular income. How hard is it not knowing what your income is from one month to the next?
Oh my gosh, it's like a constant stress. And it's not necessarily knowing if you can pay your bills or not. It's knowing if you can pay your team so they can pay their bills. It's things like knowing that you're going to come to work, and this is just crazy how my brain works, but like maybe the landlord would change the locks overnight because I didn't pay the rent last month. It's this kind of, and it's the constant fear. And so a lot of people might understand it more if we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So everyone has different needs, and one of the lowest needs is the need for physical safety and a roof over our head and food in our bellies and stuff like this. Now I have all of that. I'm very, very lucky. My husband is such an amazing provider. Like everything's covered. So we do a lot of podcasts about homelessness and really difficult topics that every day give us real gratitude for the circumstances that we all have. But I think there's something about the next levels up on that hierarchy of needs around, you can't do personal development or self-actualization needs until you've met the other needs you need to do. And actually, yeah, I'm working through my relationship with money right now. And money, I think sometimes some of my view is money's evil. And that's not true. But there's a lot of this which I haven't even explored yet around apartheid and shame. So I grew up in South Africa in the late 80s, early 90s, where we were going through a fight for independence and Nelson Mandela was being inaugurated, and there was a lot of racial tension. And so I have huge guilt about the apartheid and the way that people were segregated. I have memories of different staircases. I have memories of different ways people worked. When I went to school in 1996, in my school, we were in a very white area of Johannesburg. And it was the first year the school was integrated, where they had kids of other races and it wasn't just white kids. So that sounds crazy because that was 1996. That's fairly recently. But for me, that was all of this social upheaval was going on. And it's interesting how much we internalize it. And I wonder then for my own daughter or for kids now, the COVID generation,
yes,
how is that going to impact their lives and their self-esteem and their views on things? So yeah, if I look back, for me, there's always this thing about, well, you've got so much, so give it away. But then also it's okay to have, so it's a really hard when you're a purpose-led organization as well. I do sometimes think we should have set up as a kick. We would have had more funding and we would have had a clear way to support people.
Yeah.
But at the time I did set up as a business, I didn't know what I was doing, and I just happened to set up a limited company. So there's so much you learn, and I'm still learning.
I think we all are, aren't we? And going back to those roadworks, I can't imagine how horrendous that would have caused me so much stress. Has that stopped now? Where are you at as a business?
Yeah, so it did stop. And, we probably could have maybe serviced certain clients earlier or done things differently. I think we've had some real wins. So we had triple glazing put in. So we now have better sound. We've been able to negotiate with the traffic lights that have been installed outside. Certain times that the beepers come on, and we've been able to develop a great relationship with the council. It's taught me a lot about how everyday risks can come up. So I always thought I was a very strategic person, able to kind of horizon scan risks, but this one really floored me. And so it's taught me that nothing is guaranteed. So right now, we're recording again. We've got great clients and we get a lot of leads. We do a lot of one-off bookings. One of the things that I've mainly been focusing on at the moment is how can I do more at scale? So the type of things we love to do is we love to curate an experience for listeners and for a show. So from the whole start to finish, everything feels really special and really connected and really planned. So we love doing set design, but it takes us so much time. We could spend ages finding the exact sofa we need, the type of curtains, we pin them up, we steam them, we have different backdrops, and we've only got so much space to store things as well. So that becomes an issue. So I feel like now we're trying to figure out, well, how can we do things differently or better? And one of the things that I'm really mindful of is my coaching. So I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, but I really need to look towards one-to-many and start to really offer a membership or something else like that, because I am so fortunate that my job is to get paid to chat. How cool is that? And how cool to help other people who want to do the same. But then because I find it so easy, I find it so hard to tell people about, and I find it so hard to ask for money for it, because it's my thing, it's my gift. I always thought, I was always in detention for chatting, always. And I just think, how can I charge for something that's so innate? But this is the thing about gifts, is we all have them. And there are people who are so amazing at planning and contingencies and organizing and just areas that are not my gifts. And I look up to them. So it's interesting. What is your innate gift, do you think?
Oh, goodness, that's a question. I do think it maybe is communication in all the different forms that I do it, and podcasting. And I don't know, I think I'm okay at interviewing. People tell me I am. I'm quite empathetic, so I think that helps when, especially on the type of podcast that I have. But yeah, communication in different forms, because I guess that's where I fell into my career, and I enjoy that as well. But maybe I'm wrong. You know, it's so interesting when just the talk of gifts, because some people, like we say, they have to work harder at things, and they find themselves in a career that they want to be in because they like it, even though perhaps it's not as much a natural talent as other things. It's such, and then maybe if you know your gift, it's not truly a gift almost, but then it takes years to discover your gift, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, you hold space for people, and then what you do is you take that word, so you take that whole big verbal thing, and then you turn it into something that's simpler. And I think that's a really powerful thing, because so many of us aren't able to articulate our stories or our journeys or our thoughts or our feelings or our business goals or dreams. So to have somebody who can refine it and communicate it and package it is really powerful as well. So I think that's a real gift.
I'd say the same for you as well. I think it's your warmth, your energy, the magic that you create.
Thank you.
But again, you feel safe. Sat on a podcast of yours in your presence. And that you get a very real sense that you want to genuinely help someone and you want the best for that person, which is lovely.
Yeah, it is. And then sometimes that comes with a lot of taking care of people. And so, you know, sometimes part of nurturing your zest is also going, right, I need to cleanse my energy, as in like psychic protection. I mean, just like whether it's, you know, something spiritual, like using crystals or like a affirmation or like a meditation of some kind. You know, it could be saying to someone, I'm sorry, I can't do your episode because I'm not the right person to help you share this story, but someone else might be. We're all so different. And that's something, even when things are tougher than others, is hold on to that. That's what I'm holding on to. So we are recording again. We're having a great time. We're making mint content. Got a fantastic new season coming out of Nurture Your Zest, which thank you so much for being a guest and a guest host. But also we have a new product and place-based podcast starting in the Northeast, which I'm really excited about. And it's our chance to get excited about local business and shine a spotlight on people. And it's less about the inspiring stories of the founders, but more about the customers. Lovely. What do they love about that organization or that place and those products? And we were really excited to bring that to life. So that's something we're testing out. We'll see if it works. But I think it's fun to be playful and experimenting again.
I agree. So Ash, I have to end on the question you ask your guests. What's your one word you use to nurture your zest?
That is a really hard question. And I've had so many variations in answer. I'm going to say magic based on this conversation. So I think what I'm going to say right now is sometimes I need to remind myself to look for the magic in the everyday, but also to remember that by being vulnerable and courageous and putting myself out there sometimes, even when I feel like I want to hide away, it helps to unlock the magic in others. So I'm going to go with magic.
I love that. The magic of the mundane.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for this honor of interviewing you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Nurture Your Zest today. If you're feeling extra kind, it would mean so much to me if you could share this episode with your friends or family or anyone who you think might feel inspired by this content. Liking, sharing, or interacting with our content is a great way to support us as content creators, and it helps us to bring interesting stories and more people to you. This podcast is a Flamingo Heights podcast studio production, and I've been your host, Ashleigh King. If you liked today's episode, follow the video on your screen now, or check out the link in your show notes to find similar content.